Hi again. Here we are to continue with our movie app, and I've got the detail view controller all set up with some IB outlets here. And now what I want to do is try and connect it to the table view controller and pass some data in here, right? So let's do that. So our next step, let me close the assistant editor and then go to the details view controller here. So there's details view controller. And what I need is I need a variable to hold the data. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pass a movie in here, like one movie. Like remember we have this movie object here, and a movie object contains, the movie class contains instances of this class. We'll have these properties: name, summary, category, image, artist, ID, right? So we'll just pass a whole movie object over to the detail view controller, and then the detail view controller will have access to all those properties of that class, and it can display them however it likes. It can put the name here, and it can put the image in here, okay? So we need a variable for that. Let's say var movie, which is type movie, uppercase, right? And we'll make that an optional, right? Because maybe you got to this view controller, but somehow you didn't set the movie, right? Because here we don't know what the movie's going to be yet, right? It's, we can't predict that, right? So it has to get set from outside. So I think optional is okay for this, right? And then if this got the movie, what we would do is maybe I'm going to do this. I'm going to add a new method here, right? Before, inside here, before, view did load and did receive memory warning, but inside the class, what we'll do is, why don't we do this too? Why don't we add a mark here? Mark view life cycle, right? So all the view life cycle methods will be here, and these are all methods that get called when a view is about to appear, when it was loaded, when it disappears, right? So we'll add the view will appear method. Okay, so view will appear is called when the view is just about to be shown on the screen. So this is the perfect time to set the value of labels and start loading an image, or adjust the appearance of the view right before we see it, okay? View did load, like a view may be loaded, but then it may not be shown, right? And sometimes it's loaded and then shown and then put away and then shown again, and if it still exists, it doesn't get loaded again, right? So view will appear happens every time the view is about to be shown. So that's the perfect time to make sure that we're showing the correct data from the movie object. Okay, so once we write this one, what we need to do is, since it says override here, this method actually belongs to our superclass view controller. And so we need to call this same method that belongs to view controller here before we do our stuff. So what we're going to say is we're going to say super dot view will appear. So we'll call the same method. This method requires a parameter called animated, right? So we'll just pass the same value for animated up to our superclass. So that way, if there's anything the superclass needs to do in view will appear, then the superclass will also take care of it, okay? And then our override of that method can do its stuff here, okay? So what we'll do is we'll check the movie object, which is optional. So we'll check it to make sure that it's got a value. Otherwise, if it's nil, we don't do anything. So what we'll do is we'll say if, we'll go down here and we'll say if let movie equal movie, and then we'll say about name label dot text equals movie dot name. Okay, we also want to set the image view, but I'm going to do that in the next video because it takes a little more work. So we'll just get this one set up and make sure that we pass a movie in here, and then we know when we see the name, then we know everything's working, and then we can move on and add the image, okay? So our next step now is to make sure that we set this movie property. And so to do that, we'll go back to the table view controller, because this is where it's going to begin, right? So we're back at our table view controller. And inside the table view controller, at the very bottom, there's a section called navigation. I'm going to uncomment that. And if it isn't here, you can just add the prepare method, which is prepare for Segue. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to prepare for Segue. So what does prepare for Segue mean, right? let me do this. I'm going to not wrap. There we go, right? So what does prepare for Segue do? Well, prepare for Segue is a message that this class will get when we're going to execute a segue. And so a segue is when we move from one view to the next. Okay, so when we're going to move from one view to the next, this view gets a notice saying like, hey, prepare for the segue that's coming up, right? Like get ready because you're going to get put away and we're going to replace you with another view. So what we'll do is we'll say, hey, if, and what we're doing is we're going to check the segue, and every segue has an identifier, okay? Right, and the value for the identifier is a string, which is the name that we assign to the segue in Storyboard. And if you'll remember, we called it toDetailsSegue. Let's go back to Storyboard, click on our segue here, go look at the properties, and you can see the identifier name right here is toDetailsSegue. I'll just even copy that name, and then go back to my table view controller, and then right here where it says, segue.identifier, if that is the toDetailsSegue, then we know that we're going from the table view to the detail view, okay? So that's pretty good. So now what we need to do is we need to get the index path for our current row, okay? So we tapped on a cell to go to that next row. So what we'll do is we'll say, hey, if let index path equal table view dot selected what is it? Index path for selected row. My mistake. Let's do index path for selected row. Now, don't get the one that's index paths with an S, right? Because that's a different one. That's like multiple rows were selected. In our table view, only one row will be selected. So we'll choose this one, index path for selected row. See, it's optional, right? So it's got the question mark. So that's why I use the if-let syntax here. So if there isn't anything selected and we get here, then we'll skip over it, right? So there we go. Now we've got our index path. And so now what we can do is we can say, we need to do a couple things. We need to get the destination view controller, and then we can give it a movie from our array of movies that's, at the same row in this index path. So it'll match the cell that you selected. So what we'll do is we'll get the destination view controller first. So we'll say var, how about destination view controller equals segue dot destination. Okay, now this returns a regular UI view controller. So I'm using the option key. I click on the thing and I can see it's a view controller, but our view controller that we're actually going to is a details view controller. So we'll have to cast this with as details view controller. Okay, and now we can say, hey, destination view controller dot, and then we can say movie, which is a property. It's an optional movie, right? That's the variable that we created inside details view controller, and we can set that to movie manager dot movies, and then we can get our movie from the array here by using the index path. Okay, so we'll type in index path dot row. Okay, so we got our movie. We passed it on to the detail view, and let's give it a test. So we'll try it out here. I guess it's saying I could have made that a let. I guess I should have made that let. We can change it later. Okay, so we'll tap on Ghostbusters, and then you can see it says Ghostbusters, right? It's cutting off the text. We've got to make the label a little bit bigger, but that seems to be working, okay? So anyway, thanks for watching, and then in the next video, maybe we'll do a little more with the detail view.